Hi everyone, I'm Rhonda from Acres of Clay Kitchen, and today I'm going to show you how to can roast beef. First of all, let me give you a little bit of background information. If you've seen my other channel, Acres of Clay Homestead, I shared with you that we had a young heifer split herself and we ended up having to butcher her. Now, if you know anything about cattle, you know that cows walk like this and they cannot go out like this. Once they go out like this, it tears everything in here, and for that to re-heal, I think it's pretty much impossible. So anyways, she split herself on one leg. So we had one quarter that we discarded, and then I butchered the other 3/4. Most of that went in the freezer, but I have canned some, and I'm gonna can some more today. This just finishing up the last of her, and so I wanted to bring you along and show you how I can the roast. Now, the number one question I get, why not freeze it? Why do you can it? And number one reason for this is because I have limited freezer space. I have one big chest freezer and two smaller freezers, and usually if I'm canning meat, it's because I either got a really good deal on it at the store, which would be chicken or pork, and then I stock up on that and I fill the freezer with as much as I need in the freezer, and I can what I would like to can. So it just works out that way. I prefer having a little bit of canned meat on the shelves just because it's convenient. That's the main reason why I can, is convenience. It's so easy to open up a can of roast beef and mix it with a soup or in a casserole, or make tacos or pulled sandwiches, or open up a can, make it into a gravy mix and pour that over mashed potatoes. You know, the possibilities are endless, and that's why I like having a quick, convenient food for the days that get a little hectic. So I'm going to show you how I can the roast beef. I've already, if you can't see this, I have a pretty big bowl here. It's already cut in pieces. These are like bite-sized pieces. I try to cut everything in uniform size so that it all cooks pretty much equally. So this is all cut up. I don't know how much I have. I figure in about 15 pounds. Today I'm gonna actually be partially cooking this meat before I can it. There's different ways to can roast beef, and the number one way I prefer doing it is just raw pack. Raw packing it into a jar and adding a little seasoning or salt, whatever you like, putting a lid on it and throwing it in the canner. Easy. You don't add any liquid, there's no pre-cooking. It's just meat in a jar, and that's as easy as that gets. But today I'm actually going to put it in a pan, and I am gonna start frying it a little bit, just browning the outside of it. I made some bone broth, so I'm going to be adding that as the stock or the juice that is going to be filling the jars. Now, if you're raw packing it, you don't add any liquids, because the juice from the meat is released and it makes its own juice, so you don't have to add any liquids. Okay, so let's get started. I'm just going to, I have a pretty small skillet that's gonna take a few batches. It's gonna take a little bit to get this meat all browned, but I'm just gonna actually kind of sear the outsides of this. As you can see, what I tried to do is only get the leanest. You don't want a lot of fat in your jars, just because that fat can interfere with the sealing if when it's boiling and bubbling all up, and if you get a layer of fat around the edge of your jar, then sometimes that jar might not seal properly. So the less fat, the better, in my opinion. And some of you I know are going to be asking, just as I was finishing butchering this meat, I was actually cutting some meat off a bone to make bone broth, and my knife slipped. I was using my right hand and my knife slipped, and it did cut my my middle finger. It sliced the skin right on the top, pretty deep, but it didn't cut to the bone, I don't believe. So I have a little L-shaped cut right between my knuckle and my fingernail. and it's pretty sensitive, so I'm covering it with a glove today. I've been wearing gloves and bandages just so that I can keep it clean, and it's going to heal. I've already noticed that it's healing quite well. I believe that God created our bodies to heal, so I'm believing that my finger will heal completely without any lasting effects. For those of you that were questioning or wondering why I'm wearing a glove only on one hand, that is the reason. Moving right along, I'm going to finish. I'm going to start browning this meat, and then I'll bring you back once I have this whole bowl browned. Okay, so you can see how much moisture this has let out. So this is exactly why we have to add broth to the jars once you cook it, because you're releasing all the moisture from the meat. There will still be a little bit. For the most part, a lot of this is being released, so then we have to add it back to the jar once you fill your jars. Okay, this one I'm going to call about done. It's not completely cooked all the way through, but I'm not looking to cook it all the way through. I'm just looking to brown it and release some of this liquid. Now I'm just going to go ahead and remove these, put them on a platter, and these can go right in the jar. These are ready to go into your canning jars. Since we are running these through the pressure canner, it is not necessarily recommended that you sanitize these or scald them with hot water for any length of time. Just make sure that your jars are completely clean and everything that you're working with, all your tools and everything. Today I'm going to be using the Tatler lids with the seal, the plastic lids with the rubber seal. These are reusable. I've used these a few times already, and I've been very happy with the way they've turned out. These are new to me, so I'm still learning. I've had success on all the jars that I've canned so far, so far so good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start filling my jars, and I'm just going to fill these with 1-inch head space. That whole frying pan pretty much fit in here. So yeah, I'm going to actually save these juices and go ahead and pour these in here also, because I didn't feel like there was a lot of fat in that, so that's why I did that. Now earlier I made some bone broth out of some of the knuckles and the bones of that cow, so I am going to use some of this bone broth to fill my jars. This bone broth has a little bit of salt and some seasonings in it. Of course I used vegetables and peppers, garlic, onions, leeks, all that. That doesn't take a whole lot of broth, just a little, and you want to make sure that it's at 1-inch head space. So you want to make sure that you don't go over 1 inch, because if you do that, a lot of times the juices will siphon out and then you'll have less broth in there, and you don't want that. And then you just take a wet paper towel that's either wet with water or vinegar, doesn't matter, I don't think, and just go around the rim, make sure there's no grease or any meat on the edge, and then I always run my finger over the rim to make sure there's no cracks or nicks in the glass. I forgot to mention that you're going to want to debubble of them, which is just running your debubbler, this is what I call a debubbler, along the sides of this. And then the 2-part lid, I always put the seal on just like this, and put the ring on, fingertip tight, and then I loosen it a little bit, and then this meat is ready to go into the canner. Alright, I ended up getting 6 quarts of beef, and I'm going to go ahead and stick them in my pressure canner. In the bottom of this I have 2 quarts of warm water. I'm going to go ahead, start placing my jars in the canner, turning the heat to this on high, and yeah, we're going to get the canning process started. If you want to run your canner full, which is usually what I like to do, you can find something else that can be pressure canned for 90 minutes. A lot of people don't like to have empty jars laying around. If they're going to be empty, you might as well fill it with water. So you could do that. You could fill this one with water and make it your 7th quart, because mine holds 7 quarts. And that way you have canned water in case of an emergency, power goes out or whatever. And then if you ever need your jar, just pour the water out and use your jar. So it doesn't really cost anything or hurt anything other than you're got to use a lid. And if you're not using the reusable lids, I probably wouldn't waste a lid on using it for water. That's my own preference, at least right now, because it's hard to get lids. So I have all 6 quarts in my canner, and I'm going to put the lid on. And then I'm going to tighten down the nuts. And then we're just going to let this come up to a boil. Once it starts boiling, steam is going to come out of this vent. And at that time, when you see a lot of steam coming out, you're going to want to vent this for 10 minutes. For my altitude, it's 10 pounds pressure, and since I'm using quart-sized jars, I am going to process them for 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. If you're using pint-sized jars, process those for 75 minutes. But I'll bring you back in the different stages to show you how it goes. Okay, this has been venting like this. Can you hear that? For 10 minutes. So I'm going to put my weight on. It's my 10 pounds. I'm going to wait for it to reach up to 10 pounds of pressure. Once it starts jiggling, I start setting my timer for 90 minutes. Once 90 minutes is done, we shut the heat off and we don't touch it. We just let it set until the pressure drops. This has been jiggling and processing for the last hour and a half, and my timer just went off, so I'm going to go ahead and shut the burner off, and we're going to let this sit until my pressure gauge is back down to 0, which can take maybe a half hour or so. So we're just going to let this sit and not do anything. Okay, my pressure gauge is at 0, so I can go ahead and take the weight off. It's going to release a little bit of extra steam that is built up in here, which is perfectly fine. And what I'm going to do is just loosen these, but I'm not going to take the lid off just yet. Just going to kind of release this and let out just a little bit of steam, like take it off on an angle just a little bit, and then I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes, because if you take these jars out right now, the insides of the jars are still boiling. I don't want all the juices and the broth to siphon out of the jars. So I'm just going to let it sit here for probably about 5 minutes, and then I'll bring you back. It's been close to an hour since I opened this up a little bit. Just because I had to go out and do some chores and stuff. So now I'm going to take a look at it, and we're going to get these jars out of here. With the Tatler lids, what you need to do is take them out. Let me show you here real quick. And then tighten the bands down. Just like this. And make sure that they're good and tight. And I have to do that with all of them. So as you can see, they're all fully cooked and they look good. You can smell them. So this is roast beef canned. Hope you give this recipe a try. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next video. Take care.